Hey guys, it's Grant Kemp from CreativeCashFlow.com. Today what I want to talk about is I want to go over actually contracting properties. As this is going to be where, the pen meets the paper. This is the most important thing that you're working towards the whole time. So what we're going to be going over today is going to be like a sub-2 contract. This is all the paperwork it takes to get a sub-2 contract done. It's a lot of stuff. And so it's really important that you're able to present this the right way to your seller so that your seller is comfortable with moving forward with that transaction. I've contracted a lot of houses. I've gone through a lot of deals, and what I've had the benefit of doing during this time is seeing what the questions are, seeing what people, kind of point out whenever you're going through the contract, what they want to hear about. And so a lot of what I'm saying today is going to be directly to nip that off at the bud. What we want to do is we want to present the answer to the question before the question even gets asked. That way people feel really comfortable about what's going on. Whenever you do ask them, hey, do you have any more questions? We want to get a no, and we want to get a genuine no out of them, okay? And if you have any inkling that that no is not genuine, you've got to start asking those open-ended questions again. What? Why? Why? Anything that could not be answered with a yes or no, those are the kinds of questions that you need to get from them. And you really need to peel out what's happening inside of their brains so that you can understand their position and better give a solution that's going to work for them, as well as what's going to work for you, okay? So we want to nip that in the bud. We want to answer as many questions as we can just through our going through of the contract, and we want to give them opportunities to ask questions. And I will say this very, very, very important, that you take it very seriously in encouraging them to read the contract. And if they want to read the contract, give them the time and do not stress them about it. Again, this goes back to the ethics of everything. I feel it's very important that when we're in this business, that we are giving everybody a fair opportunity to know what's going on, and that we are doing our best job not to sweep anything under the rug and to make sure that everything is out on the table. Because again, with the subject to deal especially, this is a marriage. This is a long-term commitment that we've got between us and the seller, and we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page moving forward. And as you take that approach while you're contracting somebody, it really comes across as genuine. It really helps us to where, as we go down that road, we're not going to run into issues later on where they misunderstood something, because as you'll see in the contract, things get repeated 2, 3, 4 times a lot of times because we really need that to stick through in their brain. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be talking straight onto this camera here, and I'm going to be acting like you are the seller. This camera angle, you are the seller. There's going to be a couple of times where I may have an aside that I'm going to kind of pull out from the script, as it may be. And when I do that, to talk to you as an aside, I'm going to cut over here and talk to you as the investor, okay? So this is going to be the investor angle. This is if I'm telling you something kind of off to the side about this contract that isn't something that we're telling the seller directly, but something I want you to know. But other than that, everything I'm talking to you here about is the script. And I encourage you guys to watch this video several times and really try and get as close as you can to the words that I'm saying in the order that I'm saying them, because they've been carefully crafted over a long period of time to make sure that we're getting the proper things out in front of people to make them feel comfortable with this contracting and with this purchase, okay? So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and start as though you're the seller. This is our contract. And the first thing you want to do before moving into the contracting stage is ask them if they have any more questions. So it's just going to start off like this. All right, so do you guys have any more questions before we go forward and start signing on the contract? Okay, good. So what we're going to do then is we're going to move forward. We're going to go ahead and get the contract signed. Now, this looks like a lot of paper, and I totally get that. I understand it. But I do want to point out that the first 9 pages of this is the state promulgated TREC form. Everybody that buys a house in Texas signs these first 9 pages. You probably signed the same exact contract whenever you were buying this house initially. The rest of it, this is the addendum, and this is what talks about specifically the subject to side of things, specifically the owner financing. So like I said, I know there's a lot of paperwork here, but we got to think about, hey, we're contracting the house and we're doing the financing all at once. So if you remember whenever you bought your house, you had all the contract paperwork for the actual purchase of the house, but then you also had to do a whole lot of other paperwork for the mortgage itself, for the actual financing. We're getting both of those done in one fell swoop with this. All right, so do you have any other questions? Okay, cool. And please, I want to be very, very clear about this. If you have any questions at all, please stop me. I really want to answer those. I really want to make sure that you understand what's going on. This is going to be a long-term relationship between us, so I want to make sure that you're comfortable with everything. If you want to read anything in here, I'll give you plenty of time to read it. But otherwise, what I'll do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of point out the high points of parts of this contract that you should pay attention to. And again, if you want to read more of it, please don't hesitate to go ahead and do that. But we'll go ahead and get started. So right here at the top, you're going to see my name. This is my company name who's buying it from you. Now, as an investor, if you're doing a wholesale deal, you're going to need to have the and/or assigns in this area. Okay? If you have and/or assigns in this area and you are planning to wholesale it or whatever, if it's there, this would be the time that you also tell them that. Okay? I've got and/or assigns here, which is like we discussed earlier. I'm going to be looking for somebody else that I know who may be willing to pick up this property at enough of a price that's going to make it make sense for me as well. And you should have already explained how that wholesaling stuff works. If you need help on how to phrase that, watch my wholesaling contracting video, watch my wholesaling series on how to really phrase what you're doing with your seller, because we want them to feel comfortable with the fact that you're wholesaling it. We don't want to hide that under the rug. That only comes back to bite you. And again, honesty is really, really huge in this industry, so we need to make sure that we're doing that correctly. So here we are. This is my company's name that I'm going to be purchasing this under. And can you just verify that I spelled your names correctly right here for me? Okay. This right here, this is the property address. Now, this is our legal description. This is everything from the tax, DCAD and everything that says lot block, whatever. And your address is listed right here. Down here, we have our sales price. Now, what you can see in this sales price is that we're going to be paying, and this is where you put in whatever amounts that you're paying here. So I haven't filled this contract out. It's blank. I'm just going to throw some random numbers in. Like we're buying it for a total of $100,000. We've got a $10,000 back payments that we have to pay to catch up this loan. And when all is said and done, we're going to be buying the house for approximately $95,000 on the loan. But that's a little bit squirrely right now, but just bear with me because you're going to understand more about what we're talking about, since not all of the arrearages go towards principal. So as we talked about before, I'm going to be purchasing the house for $100,000. Okay, so that's what you see down here at the bottom price here. That's everything that you owe in back payments. Now, we understand that $10,000 of that is, that's everything you owe, back payments and principal. We understand that there's back payments of about $10,000 on this property. So I'm not going to put that right here. I'm actually going to put that as a closing cost, and you're going to see that on the Addendum A for me. But we are pointing out the fact that we're purchasing the house for $100,000 total. I'm just going to be taking over on that mortgage that you have and paying on your behalf moving forward. As far as earnest money, I'm going to be depositing $100 with this title company or this law firm right here, so you can know exactly where that's going. And with title policies, when we're doing a subject to property like this, whenever I'm coming in and I'm buying a house and I'm continuing to pay payments on your behalf, I actually don't require you to pay for a title policy for me. Most of the time, the seller in a transaction is responsible for paying for a title policy for the buyer, but we're not going to do that to you because there's already a title policy when you bought your property on that house, on the mortgage that you have. That title policy exists. I'm going to do a title run. I'm going to make sure that everything has transferred hands correctly to make sure that you are the full owner of the property, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to require you to pay the extra money for a title policy, so that'll save you a couple grand right there. So with this side, you'll just need to initial down here at the bottom, and then just kind of slide it forward to them. They should have a pen ready to sign. You're going to have them initial right there. I like to take the method of where we're going to walk through each bit of this contract piece by piece and have them sign at the end of each page. Okay, so just initial there. Now we move on to this next page, the survey right here. Now the survey is going to be that thing that kind of looked like a blueprint, and you got this whenever you originally closed on the house. If you don't know what you're looking for with that, if you just have that folder from when you closed on this property, whatever folder you got from your title company, if you could bring that to me, there's going to be 2 or 3 things that I need out of there. The survey is going to be one of them. I'll look for it there. I'm also going to need to cut a copy of the original note and your deed of trust that's in there, but that'll all be in that paper. We can get that at the end here. All I'm getting at with this is that we would like the survey for this property. It's not a requirement since I'm doing the subject to. I don't need that, but if you've got it, all the better, okay? So I'm going to put NA next to this. but if you've got it, all the better. Objections here. Now, under objections, this is going to be something that a lawyer a while back had me start putting single family use in that. And honestly, I can't think of a situation where we would ever be in where we're buying a single family house from a seller and it comes down that that house is not able to be used as a single family use, but I still put single family use in this line always. So I will just tell them, on this line, I'm just putting down that I could, if it turns out that this house for whatever reason isn't able to be used as a single family residence, that would give me grounds to be able to back out of this contract. But you and I both understand you're living here as a single family house. Likelihood of that happening is going to be slim to none. So on this, you'll just go ahead and initial down there at the bottom. And moving on to this next page, like I mentioned, this first 9 pages, this is something that everybody in Texas signs. So we're going to find a lot of things in this particular part of the contract that aren't necessarily applicable to what we're doing. For instance, we're talking about tidewaters here. What happens with tidewaters coming up? Well, hey, we live in Dallas, so we don't really have to worry about tidewaters. Annexation, if you're outside of city limits, that kind of stuff. So these kinds of things are not something that really affect us directly. So you'll just go ahead and initial down here at the bottom. Now, property condition. I'm going to be buying this house as is, okay? So I'm accepting your property and I'm buying it as is. I'm not expecting you to do any kind of repairs, anything to it. We're buying it just as it looks today, okay? Now, that said, if something happens past today that deteriorates the property significantly, we're going to need to figure out what's going to happen with that. But as it stands now, we're buying it as is. And then the seller's disclosure, that's going to be something that I'm going to need to receive from you, okay? So the seller's disclosure is just another piece of documentation that Texas requires a seller to give when they're selling a property in Texas. And it's about 3 pages, and you just kind of check mark like, yes, I have a microwave, yes, this is gas, or no, this isn't gas, or, I've got a roof that's 5 years old, that kind of stuff, just very basic things. It doesn't really matter to me, but it is a requirement for you to hand that to me. So I'm going to give you 10 days in which you can fill that out and get that back to me. And then as far as the residential service contract, that would be if we were buying like a home warranty. I'm not going to require you to buy a home warranty. Again, that's really common in the retail world that a buyer is going to require you to put up whatever, $500, $1,000 towards a home warranty, but we're not going to do that. So I'm going to put 0 in this field, and you'll go ahead and initial there at the bottom. Closing. Now we've got this closing 60 days out. So like we talked about before, I'm going to have 2 months to be marketing the property, trying to find a buyer to buy it from me. Now the thing that I want to point out to you here is that even though we are putting the closing 60 days from now, this says that we're going to close on or before. So in all likelihood, we're going to find a buyer. We're going to be able to close on this much sooner than 60 days, but this kind of makes it to where we don't have to come back and sign extra paperwork to extend a date out if we need to extend that date out. Now, something for the investors to understand here is that if you're doing something along the lines of a foreclosure, now a foreclosure is not going to give you that 60-day period. So obviously you're just going to put in ideally the Friday before that foreclosure. Now in Texas, the way that foreclosures work is it's the first Tuesday of every month, and that money needs to be provided to the bank the previous Friday in order to pull that property from foreclosure. So that's going to be the date that we would put in this contract. But if it's not foreclosure and you do have some luxury of time, we do want to shoot for that 60-day period, because that's what allows you to go out and market and try and find a buyer to buy it from you, and where you can really make your money on this deal. Possession of this property, we're not going to take possession of this property until we've closed on the deal, okay, and all the money has been funded. So until then, you will remain in the house. This will be your house. Special provisions. Now, special provisions is going to be something where you may have had to write something in there funky. They may have requested something from you, and this can range from a whole ton of things. I mean, it can range from their throwing in, the appliances. You might put that in there, that all the appliances stay, or you're not supposed to put in here any kind of leaseback terms because there is a separate document for the leaseback. But anything else that goes along with this contract that you guys have talked about, you need to have that in writing, and this is where you put that, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't count for squat. Okay, so special provisions. If you've got special provisions, you're just going to say, these are the special provisions that we have. If not, you're just going to say, we don't have any special provisions. And just like before, I'm not going to be requiring you to put extra money into the closing costs here, so we're going to write in 0 right there, and then you'll just initial down there at the bottom. This is another one of those pages that has a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily apply to us, but one thing I do want to point out is the mediation clause. if we do have a disagreement here, we're not going to sue each other. We're going to go through a third-party mediator. This is going to be something that's lined out. You know, it used to be an option until the Real Estate Commission in Texas started saying, no, we just need to make sure everything's going through mediation. It's a good way to level the playing field for everybody, because it's not that the big bad company can just pour money and resources into our lawyers and just drown you out of it. Mediation is going to level that field for us so that it makes it a little bit easier for you and I to get to the end of any kind of disagreement there. Now, I will be very clear in the fact that I've never had anybody have to go through mediation with me, but I just want to point that out as we're going forward in the beginning. All right, so go ahead and initial down there at the bottom. On this page, what I'm going to need from you is I'll need you to sign, or I need you to fill out your mailing address, a phone number. If you do have a fax number that you want us to send stuff to, give me your fax number right here, and then give me your email. This is going to be the information that we use if we ever need to communicate with you, if we ever need to send you something or call you. This will be the information that we're using to go off of there. Similarly, I will be filling out this side right here, so when you have a copy of the contract, you have a phone number, an email, a fax number, and an address to get a hold of me. So go ahead and fill that out, and then we're going to initial down here at the bottom. And then after they get done initialing, one of the things that I'll say is I do want to just point out that in this section down here, we're saying what else is going to be attached to this contract. Really, we don't have much attached to this contract with the exception of the Addendum A. And what we're going to do here as investors is we're going to check off this very last box that says Other, and we're going to write in Addendum A. And we're going to tell them, we've checked this off that says Addendum A. Now, Addendum A is, like I explained to you earlier, that's the stuff that actually describes everything that has to do with the owner financing side of it, the subject to side of it, comes in Addendum A. So we're connecting this as one contract. If you have a seller leaseback, if you're allowing the seller to stay in their home for a little while, you need to check off the box over here that they're getting a seller's temporary lease. And you need to have that promulgated form that outlines how long they get to stay there and what their rent is and what their rent will be if they go past the point in time that you've agreed to let them stay there. And then finally on this page, we've got our termination option. Again, I've talked to you about it's going to be a 60-day option period that we've got here. That's going to be the period of time that I'm looking for somebody to buy the property from me. Once I find somebody to buy the property from me, that will mean that I will tell you we're ready to close, and then we'll close. If that happens next week, all the better. If it happens in 2 weeks, great. So it's on or before 60 days from now. And if I'm unable to find somebody to buy it from me, this does give me the option to terminate the contract. However, I will tell you, I have not had to terminate any contracts that I haven't told the person right up front, right now, hey, this is a difficult contract for me and I don't think I'm going to be able to close it, but we'll see what we can do. And I mean that very honestly too, because if you are getting pushed so hard in your numbers that this deal is no longer really a deal for you and it's getting really difficult for you to make the numbers match, still get the contract. Get the option contract, but be very clear with them, hey guys, I can probably get this done because I'm really good at what I do, but what you've asked for is really pushing my numbers, and so it's going to take me, I definitely need this option. I definitely need the ability to go out there and try and find somebody to buy it from me. And if I can't, that means that I can't do this deal, okay? So be very upfront with them about stuff like that, all right? They need to understand that you have that option and that you are probably going to exercise it if you don't find somebody to buy it from you. But even outside of that, you may run into a scenario where you thought you were going to be able to close the house and you can't find a buyer for it, and then you've got to decide, are you going to front fund the property? So watch the front funding video to understand if you're willing to do that. And if not, then you need to terminate this contract, and you need to do that through the proper channels with the proper paperwork, which is the termination of contract, and that needs to be turned in at the right time. So explain to them, what I just said. So we're picking back up. So this was my option period. And neither one of us have attorneys that we're dealing with in this transaction. And at that point, you'll just need to sign right here under seller. This page right here, I'll usually just mark through because this is like if you've got realtors involved. We don't have a realtor involved. It's just you and me working here. Okay, so now we're able to move forward, and we're able to move on to the section that has to do with the actual subject to side of things. Now, investors, what I've done here is just so that you have somewhat of a visual representation, I have highlighted the areas that you're going to want to point out to these guys, right? So as we're going through this should hopefully be a little bit of a visual aid for you to kind of think about the parts of this contract that need to be talked about with your seller. The contract that I'm using here, the addendum that I'm using here, comes from Horn & Associates. I've interviewed, all of the attorneys, at least in Texas, that are doing owner financing and subject to on a large level. And I just feel the most comfortable with Horn & Associates paperwork because it really is what protects me the best, in my opinion. These guys have been doing it for longer than anybody else and have done more transactions than anybody else. That said, there are other attorneys out there, and there are other attorneys that probably charge less. But it is my opinion that it's worth the extra money to get the protection that you need, to have a real contract, and don't get intimidated by the contract size. Too many investors say, my seller's never gonna sign a contract that big. That's because you have a problem with doing a contract that big. Sellers sign a contract that big with me all the time, and I never have a negative response to it. And you saw how I opened up this whole thing by addressing that contract. For those of you watching my negotiations tip series, you've heard me talk about doing an accusation audit to where you can see what is it that your seller is going to have a problem with before you even approach that subject. And one of them is the size of the contract. So you saw the very first thing I said was, hey, this is a big contract, and then I explained it, right? So this is Addendum A. This is going to come from Horn & Associates. For those of you who are members at creativecashflow.com, you can go to the resources section and download a copy of this. Otherwise, if you're watching this through another vehicle, you can contact Horn & Associates directly to get your contracting done for you, and that's where you can get this addendum. But now I'm showing you how you can actually go through the addendum and explain everything in a way that makes sense to people. So this is the addendum. This is the part that actually deals with the subject to side of things and with the owner financing side of things. So again, like I talked about before, I'm going to go through and I'm going to point out the high points. If you want to read anything, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask, okay? So right here, this does talk about that I have the right to assign the contract like we talked about earlier. A lot of times what I'll use that for is I may be contracting under one of my company names, but in order for just proper asset protection and making sure that I don't have too many houses in one company so that everybody is kind of insulated from each other, I might move this over into another company. So even though you see this company name up here, we may actually be closing into another company name. Similarly, I would have the right to assign this to another investor. If another investor wants to come in here and take my spot on the contract, I promise you I'll make sure that it's going to be somebody that I trust to do that. But that's what allows us to do that side. This also talks about the 60-day option. Now, you and I have talked about this multiple times, but again, like I said, there's going to be a lot of repetition in this contract because we really want to make sure that you're understanding everything. So we've got a 60-day option period in here to go find out somebody to buy this property from us. And then at the end of that, we do have the option to extend for 30 days, but here's the thing is that extension is only going to happen if both you and I agree to it. So if we get to the end of the 60 days, the ball seems to be rolling, you're good with how things are going, I'm good with how things are going, we'll sign another paper that says, yes, we're going to extend for another 30 days, but I've never had to do that before. I can usually get these things closed up pretty quickly. Now down here, we do want to point out, again, we're buying this property subject to, which means we're leaving your underlying lien in place as is. I'm just going to continue to make that, that loan's payments on your behalf. Which also goes to point out that this loan isn't assumable. The loan that you have with Big Bank A, the loan that you have with whoever, that's not an assumable loan. Assumable would mean that I was going in there, sitting down, giving them all my finances, they would take you off and put me on. That's not what's happening here. I'm buying the house from you, and I'm going to continue making those payments on your behalf. It's going to have your name on the mortgage there. We're doing that without the underlying lender's consent. In other words, I'm not sending them a letter. I'm not going in and asking them permission to do this. We're just going to go ahead and keep paying on your behalf. And then there is a due on sale clause. And you and I have already talked about the due on sale clause here, but again, just to reiterate, it's not something that I'm particularly concerned about. I don't see it happen in the real world because we are going to be making those payments on time and in a timely fashion. And again, what does the bank want at the end of the day? They want their money, right? They want their payments. Now, investors, watch my due on sale clause series so that you can see the script that you should be telling people about due on sale clause, and I do encourage you to tell them about the due on sale clause right before you get into the contracting stage. Make sure that all their questions have been answered, they're ready to move forward, they're very comfortable with the transaction. Bring up the due on sale clause, make sure that they understand what the due on sale clause is, and then move forward with the contracting. Right here, we're outlining that this is an investment property for me. I am doing this because this is what puts food on my table. This is how I feed my family. This is my business. So I'm going to turn around. I will be making a profit on this property. And that even though I'm a licensed mortgage broker, and I'm partners with an attorney, neither one of us are representing you in this transaction, right? This is just me buying the property from you as an investment. Now, if you're a licensed agent, you would bring in licensed agent. If you're not licensed at all and this doesn't really apply to you, you don't need to make this a high point. But a lot of you guys are going to be licensed in some form or fashion, so go ahead and point that out to them. Once we have this contract signed, I'm going to start marketing the property for sale. So that means I'm going to be listing the property. I might put it up on MLS. I'm going to put a lockbox on the front door that'll hold a key. Now, I will give you plenty of warning, and most of my sellers want like an hour, maybe 2 hours of warning if we're going to be doing a showing, so that they can tell, hey, I need to get out of the way, or I want to clean this up, or just kind of get ready for it. It's totally fine if you're here. A lot of sellers choose to, go grab a cup of coffee or something for the moment while we're coming in there. But we will have a lockbox on there, but I won't walk into the house without ever letting you know and getting your permission to do that. If you're not, I'm sorry, speaking to the investor now, if they are not living in the property, if they are, then maybe this is a rental property or something like that, or they've already moved, this part is much easier because you're just going to say, we're going to put a lockbox and show the property and get it sold that way. But if they're living in the residence, you need to be aware of that and give them the opportunity to understand that you're not going to encroach on their privacy. You just need the ability to get in there in case they're not home and you've got a showing and you've given them fair warning that you can give in, or get in and give that tour. So that's what we talk about here. We're going to give reasonable notice to you. And I'm also probably going to be placing a sign in your front yard that says it's for sale, and it'll have my phone number on that so that people can call us about the purchase of this property. Now this part right here, this is what actually talks about the numbers that we've been going over. Okay, this is all of everything that's actually outlining the real numbers of what's going on. Now, one thing that I want to point out here is on this very next section, we have these top two items X'd off. What this says is that if the contract price, if the price that's on this piece of paper is less than the loan amount that you have to your bank, the loan amount shall govern. So in other words, if I put $100,000 on here and then we go to closing and your statement comes back and it turns out you actually owe $100,000 and $700, I'm buying the house for $100,700, even though this just says 100 on it. Similarly, the next one says if the contract price is greater. So if the price on this paper is greater than the loan amount, then the loan amount shall govern. So if I put $100,000 on here, but your loan is for $99,000, when we go to the closing, it's for $99,867, I'm buying the house for $99,687, okay? So these are guidelines that we're going off of. This is something so that we have an agreement in place right now, even though we understand that the numbers might be not 100% entirely accurate at the moment. This is proof of me showing, hey, I understood what I was getting into. Now, investor, this right here is the golden ticket, because one of the things that's going to give people an excuse to try to push contracting off to another day is they might be like, I just don't know exactly what I owe, or I don't know how far behind I am, or blah, 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 I don't know the exact numbers. And you can just reassure them, that's okay, I don't need exact numbers, I need generalizations right now. If you feel like you owe $100,000, we're gonna put $100,000 on here. And then you just point out to them, and you can do this early on in the contracting, early on in the negotiation, pointing out, all I need is I've got these two check marks here that say if your loan amount is bigger than or less than the amount that I have on our contract, we're going off the loan amount, and that will help ease their concerns about that. And then what you're going to do is later on in here we've got powers of attorney, we've got authorization to release information from the bank, so you're going to turn that into the bank and you're going to get the real accurate numbers from the bank directly. Okay, so we don't need the absolute 100% accurate numbers when we're signing the contract, but we do need something in paper, in writing, that shows that we understood kind of what we were getting after here. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go straight down the line. Our contract price is for $100,000. I'm not giving you a down payment or anything. What I'm doing is I'm going to be catching up that loan for you. And then we have our lien numbers right here. So our first lien, the current loan balance is blank, 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 blank. And just go through, if they've got a mortgage statement, before you get into the contracting period, I would have hoped that you would already have asked them for a mortgage statement so you can get all of this information that you need from a mortgage statement. A lot of times you can even get them to fax you or email you that mortgage statement before you even show up to the contract so you know what you're talking about ahead of time. And I do encourage asking for that. It's all in how you ask. You talk about our negotiation series. It's all about how you ask. If you ask with confidence and that this is just a normal piece of business, they usually provide that information pretty pain-free. Down here, we've got the pro rata next monthly payment. Now, I'm not gonna require you to make any more payments. Once we close, we're done. Now, technically in mortgages, it's a little bit different than how a rental works. A rental, you're paying at the beginning of the month for that next month, but in a mortgage, you're actually paying at the beginning of the month for time that you lived in it that last month. So really, once we close on the property, that next payment has responsibility of yours tied to it, but I'm not trying to dig in your pockets any on this. I'm just gonna keep paying that moving forward. Guys, this is a good negotiation point too, because if you're in a situation, and watch my give and take part of the negotiation series, how you should always take whenever you give, this can be one of those things that you need them to give you back if they're asking for a concession. If they are asking for too many concessions, go ahead and include that they need to pay that next monthly payment. Even if not, it's not necessarily a bad idea to start off with the idea that they should be paying that next monthly payment, because at the end of the day, if they do that, that's more money in your pocket, and that's a good day for you. This next section is the wraparound terms. We're not actually doing a wraparound on this, we're doing subject to, so I'm just gonna mark through this. Now, closing costs. Closing costs are one of those areas that's another great negotiation point, right? Because I'm gonna usually put in here 50% on both sides. That I'm gonna pay 50% of the closing costs on the acquisition, and they're gonna pay 50% on the closing costs and acquisitions. I'm ready to pay the full closing costs on all these. I don't care about paying closing costs, but by doing that, what that gives them the opportunity to do is gives them an opportunity to raise their flag and say, actually, no, I don't like that part of it, and make you concede on something. Because people need to feel like they've won. And in the negotiation series, again, we talk about negotiating and concessions and reciprocity, and the art that goes behind the give and take of it all. So we're gonna go ahead and give them a bone here to let them feel like they've won. I'm gonna put 50-50. They're gonna say, I don't like that. I'm gonna say, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll mark this through and I'll pay all of the closing costs for you. This is also gonna be where you put your arrearages. If there are arrearages in this deal, you want to put that under buyer, and you want to put dollar amount, whatever the arrearages are, and then you can put like plus 50% of normal closing costs or plus 100% of normal closing costs. The point of this contract is just so that things are in writing. But by putting the closing costs, by putting the arrearages in your closing costs, it makes it to where you are able to put that on the line of the closing statement in your HUD that allows you to make that money tax deductible from your business. So rather than putting it as a purchase cost and having that on that front page of the TREC, we're gonna put it as a closing cost, and that makes it a tax deduction for us as well. But please, approach your tax man, approach your attorney. This is what my tax man and my attorney have recommended that we do, so that's what we're doing. Again, we're pointing out here that the seller, I'm not asking you to give us a title policy on this. That's not gonna be part of the requirement of closing here. And we're gonna do a 1-year prepaid insurance policy on this. Now, you've currently got an insurance policy in place that I may add myself onto for a short period of time if there's a period between when I close on the property and when my buyer comes in to close on the property. But again, we're going to assume that we're waiting for a buyer to come in and close on this property, right? So what's gonna happen though is most likely I'm not gonna close on this property till I have a buyer in place, and I'm gonna require that buyer to bring a 1-year prepaid insurance policy. It just makes things cleaner, gets it all ready for everybody to use. The consent of note holder, again, we're just pointing out the fact that we're not asking for permission from Big Bank A to do this. The tax and insurance escrow. Now, part of your monthly payment is escrow. Part of your monthly payment, you're paying your principal and your interest, but you're also paying your taxes and insurance in that monthly payment. And that payment, the tax and insurance side, is going into an escrow account, which is basically a savings account that says that at the end of the year, whatever they need to charge to go for the next year of insurance and the next year of taxes will be paid for out of that account. I'm not gonna refund you that account because technically you're responsible for that amount of time that you've been in the house anyway. So if I was to refund it to you, you would just be writing a check right back to me at closing for that same amount. So we're just gonna leave the escrow account in place as it is. And so I'm checking off this mark right here that says we are not reimbursing the amount in the transferred account. And then the financial information here, we're going to encourage you several times in this. I mean, you have the right to see the financial information of your buyer. So if you want to see any of that financial information, you just need to let us know in writing so that we can get that. I'll tell you, none of my other sellers look for this. They're just happy to get it going with, but you're totally welcome to it. And if you want to see the information of the buyer that I'm putting into this property, just let me know because it is your right to see that kind of stuff. So I will clue you in. I'm going to be doing a full inspection of their finances anyway. You know, part of my requirements when I sell a property is I send them through Texas Pride Lending, which is an RMLO service, and I get their tax returns and their income and their credit scores and all that kind of stuff. So I'm already vetting and doing all that kind of stuff. But if you want to see it, you let me know. Now what I've done here is a very, you know, I'm letting them know that they have the right to see the financial information from their buyer. We are their buyer, okay? They do have the right to look at that. I don't really want to give them my financial information. I don't want them to know how much money I have in any one of my asset holding companies. So what I do is I start talking about the fact that I'm going to do that on my buyer, and I give them the right to look at that. And so it kind of diverts the attention over to that side of things. But that's where we approach that side. So we're going to initial there and then sign and date down here at the bottom. This is an acknowledgement. You know, again, we've got some repetition in here. The acknowledgement of the form of sale that, you know, I'm buying this property subject to that there's a due on sale clause that we've already talked about in here. We're doing that without asking the big bank one about it. And that I'm not making you any assurances that loan is going to get paid off. I mean, we've been very clear about the fact that I'm taking over, I'm going to continue making these payments on your behalf, and that you need to be prepared for me continuing to make those payments until the maturity of that loan, which in this case might be 26 years or what, you know, whatever the actual maturity of their loan is, just throw that out there. Now, chances are that that gets paid off sooner. More than likely, whoever I sell it to is going to end up selling the property or refinancing or doing something along those lines. But you need to be prepared for this loan staying in place as is for the maturity of that loan. And because of that, your name is on the mortgage. Your name does show up, you know, on your credit report. We'll show that mortgage. Now, if you want to go get another house, if you want to go get another mortgage, you just need to let us know so that we can help you with that process, because it shouldn't be an issue for you going forward. I can't promise that because I can't tell the future and I don't know what will happen with your credit outside of these kinds of factors. If something else happened to it and it made it hard for you to get a mortgage. But if it's only down to this, we'll be able to help you out with that and giving you some guidance there. Again, not guaranteeing that you can get anything, but none of my sellers, historically speaking, none of my sellers have had any problem getting a new mortgage on it. The acknowledgement of the seller here. Again, you have the right to obtain financial information on your buyer, and that the seller will have the option to foreclose. In other words, if I don't do what I said I was going to do, which is come in here and continue paying your payments and catching your loan up, if I don't do that, you have the option to foreclose on me. Now, the beautiful part about that, though, is that if that were to happen, you know, hypothetically speaking, again, none of my sellers have ever had to do this, but if that were to happen, I would have caught up your house, I would have been making your payments, paying your house down for however many years, and then if I stop doing it, you get to foreclose and take the house back from me, but your house is all caught up on payments. Ideally, the house property value will have gone up over time, and I've paid your loan down. So now you're in actually a better position than you are today because you owe less on a property that's worth more, and you're able to do whatever you want with it at that point in time. So I always tell people, you know, if your worst case scenario is better than the situation that you're in right now, it only makes sense to move forward with it. Acknowledgement of the payment options. Now, you do have the option of running this through what's called a third-party loan servicer. Now, I'm going to opt for us to just pay Big Bank A directly. You know, we know your mortgage loan number and that kind of stuff, and we're just going to make the payments every month. But if you want that to go through a third party, there are licensed agencies called third-party loan servicers where we would pay them and they would pay the bank and they would provide reporting to you and that kind of stuff. But it's going to be anywhere between $30 and $50 a month for that to happen, and that would be your responsibility to pay for that if you wanted to go down that road. Again, I'm not going to get title insurance on this. Again, we're going to go through mediation rather than going through the courts if we do have a disagreement. That this is in your best interest, that we are offering you something good here. I am saving you from foreclosure, or I am saving you from, you know, whatever the situation is. Just reiterate what it is about your offer that's helping them. And then most importantly, no oral agreements. Hey, if it's not in writing, it doesn't matter. If there's anything that we've talked about at all that isn't in writing, let me know right now, because we need to get that into the contract, because the only thing that matters is what's on the paper, okay? So go ahead and sign and date down there at the bottom. All right, get your initial hand ready, because we're about to throw out a ton of initials on this next portion here. We're just going to go one by one on this, and you're going to initial on each one of these lines, and I'll just kind of describe to you which each one of these is as we go. You are the owner of this property, that you've reviewed and accepted the terms as they are, that I'm giving you some good and valuable consideration. I'm not just saying, give me your house and have a nice day. I'm catching your payments up. I am going to continue making these payments. I'm giving you good and valuable consideration. That this is your best interest, in your best interest. I am helping you out. That you've been fully informed, you're not confused. That I've given you an opportunity to ask questions, and that you are asking questions as they come up for you. That you're satisfied with the sales price. That the sale is final, there's no take-backsies. Once we get all the contracts signed, once we go through the closing, that's final. I will own the house at that point in time. Contingencies may exist. Now in this particular case, contingencies don't exist, but that would be something along the lines of, hey, I will buy your house if you fix the foundation. We haven't talked about something like that, but they could have, and that's just pointing that out. That would have been in that special provision section that we talked about earlier. Those would be contingencies that we're working on here. That you're not giving me a loan. This isn't a loan. I'm just continuing to make payments on the loan that you already have. And that this agreement may be assigned. We talked about that on the first page. That even though we're signing a bunch of paperwork right now, and I totally get that, there's actually going to be more paperwork that we sign at closing. That's going to be what actually transfers the ownership from you to me. So we've got more papers to sign at a closing. There are going to be closing documents that need to get signed on that, and that you have a right to all the paperwork that you sign. Everything that you're signing today, everything that you sign at the closing table, all of that stuff, you can get copies of that. If you've got a copy machine here, I'm more than happy to let you take this stuff back once we get done signing it, get copies of it. Otherwise, I'll take it back to the office and I'll have my staff scan it in, and we can email it to you at that email address you gave me earlier on this page. Again, I'm entitled to make a profit. This is my business. We always advise legal counsel. If you've got a family friend that's an attorney or somebody that knows what they're doing with real estate, totally encourage you to go out and talk to them about that. Same thing with the financial review. You know, we've talked about that before. You have the right to look at your financial, the financials of your buyer. That even though we are buying the property, again, this is your loan, your name is going to remain on it, so you do have technically a continuing liability on that. But again, if you need anything on that, just contact me, contact my staff, we'll see what we can do to help you there. And if we don't do what we said we were going to do, you have the option to foreclose on us. That even if I assign this contract, you have the right to look at those financials, and I can't guarantee the credit worthiness of an assignment or anything like that. There's no guarantees on that side. But again, these two items talking about that you have the right to look at the financials and of the credit worthiness of an assignee or a buyer. That this has been fairly negotiated. I didn't pull out a gun and say, you better sign this contract or else I'm going to shoot. You know, this is something that we've gone back and forth on, figured out the right thing, and that's what we're moving forward with. That you don't have any precluding ailments that keep you from being able to sign contracts. And that you're not under the influence. You know, I have a funny story about this one. There was a contract that I was signing a while back, and literally I was on like item 19 of this. We're 3 items back, and the guy was so excited about selling his house finally and being able to get this done subject to. He pulls out from out of nowhere, pulls out this bottle of Crown, cracks it open, and starts pouring it. And I was like, please, wait, like please, can you just wait like 4 more signatures before you take that first sip? Because I really need you to sign one that says that you're not under the influence. He got a good chuckle out of that. But so yeah, you'll initial there. That there's been no other promises, similarly to what I was talking about earlier. It's in writing or it doesn't matter. And that you're not under duress, that, you know, we haven't in any way persuaded you to do this against your will, and that you're fully satisfied with the agreement. So you'll initial on those and then just go ahead and sign and date down there at the bottom. This is our insurance options, and I mentioned this to you a little bit earlier. You know, we've got 2 ways of going about this. Either we provide a 1-year prepaid insurance once we purchase the house, cancel the current insurance policy, or add our name onto the current insurance policy. The way that I like to do it is getting a 1-year prepaid insurance. So that's going to be what we do. We're going to go get a 1-year prepaid insurance policy. We're going to make sure that our buyer has a 1-year prepaid insurance policy, and that policy is going to have your name on it. So in the case of a total disaster, you know, a tornado rolls through and levels the place or whatever, we're making sure that first and foremost the underlying loan to Big Bank A, that's getting paid off before anything else is getting paid off, and that gets done through that insurance policy. So we will take care of that. So go ahead and sign and date down there at the bottom. This is going to be a contract for me to sign. Now, this is acknowledging the title insurance. Now, as I told you before, I'm not buying title insurance. I'm not forcing you to pay for title insurance. But what I am going to do is I am going to do a title run. And that title run is going to look through and make sure, same kind of stuff that happens with title insurance, but it's going to make sure that proper chain of title has occurred from who bought it, you know, who you bought it from, who they bought it from, who they bought it from. Everything has happened right. There's no extra liens on the property other than what you've already told me about. So I'm going to initial right here, and I'm going to sign and date down there at the bottom. And guys, I go ahead and sign all this stuff at the closing table, or I'm sorry, at the table when we're doing this. Acknowledgement of mortgage processing. As I mentioned before, I go through a full processing of all my buyers. You have the right to do the same thing. So if you wanted to do that, it's about $750 to get that done. And that will go through Texas Pride Lending or a similar RMLO service to make sure that all of the finances are in place for this. So if you want to do that, you do have that option. Go ahead and sign and date down there at the bottom. This is the authorization to release information. What this does is I'm going to turn this into your bank. And this is going to make it to where they have the ability to talk to me, because right now they're not going to talk to anybody but you. So what I'm putting here is I'm putting my company and its employees, so that it may be me, it may be one of my employees that calls, but what we'll need from you is I need for you to put your name right here under borrower and the last 4 of your social, and then just sign and date down there at the bottom. Now, you should fill out your company name and its employees on here. That allows you and other people's names to call. You need to fill out the lender and the loan number here, and then the property address should be on there as well. Now, this is a power of attorney. So sometimes there's going to be situations like with insurance, for instance, where an authorization to release information is not quite enough for that. Now, investors, I have 2 powers of attorney in here. I'm out on appointments a lot. I may be on vacation. I may be doing a lot of stuff. What I have is I have a power of attorney for me, and I have a power of attorney for my most trusted employee. Do not give a power of attorney to anybody that would not that you wouldn't give your own power of attorney to. I trust this employee with my life, and she's on all of my bank accounts to be able to handle payments and all that kind of stuff. I have no doubts that things are being handled the right way. Unless you have that person, don't do this. But the way that I have it is I have a power of attorney set up for both myself and my employee so that she can handle issues on this house if I'm out of the office. So what I've got here is I've got two powers of attorney. Now, the first thing I want to point out to you is that in this power of attorney, I'm not asking for your whole life. If you look on the second page, it says the following lines you may give special instructions limiting or extending the powers granted to your agent. And it says this power of attorney is specifically limited to communications and the execution of documents concerning the real property located at your address. Okay, so yes, I do have power of attorney, but it means nothing unless it's dealing with this particular house that we're dealing with right now. Okay, so I don't want your whole life. And that being said, I only want you to initial where the X's are, because again, we don't need your whole life. So what you're going to do is you're going to write your name right here. You're going to put your social. You're going to initial on each of the X's, and then you're just going to sign and date at the back. Now, this is a document that needs to be notarized. So either you're going to hand this to them at that point in time and tell them that they need to go to the bank and get it notarized. And that would be for the person who has not hesitated once to give you anything that you've asked for. They're totally in, they want to get this sold, and they've been super cooperative. If it's anything but that person that's been like amazingly cooperative, you're going to say, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get this signed, but what we'll do is we're just going to go to the bank after this. After we get the rest of this stuff signed, we'll run up to the bank real quick because they'll be able to notarize this for us because we need to get that notarized. If they have a problem with running up to the bank, hey, I've got to go pick up my daughter from school or this or that or the other, you really only need this by closing, but you need to make sure that you have this power of attorney because this power of attorney is going to make things easier for you, especially on insurance, and there's a lot of insurance stuff that you're going to have to deal with that you need this power of attorney for. Okay. If I could get this page to flip for us. This right here is for me to sign. This is part of the state's requirement whenever you sell a house in this way, whenever you're doing a subject to property. The seller is required to give the buyer all the information on that loan. So I'm going to fill all this stuff out, but all of this stuff was in your mortgage statement. So it's just going to be something that I fill out from the mortgage statement and I sign and date on that. Okay? This is you disclosing to me what you owe, so I can't come back and say, oh, they didn't tell me that they owed, because you did, and you've got a signature proof showing that you did. You know, the way that these contracts work, about half of the stuff that's in here protects me, the other half protects you. This is one of those items that protects you. This is making sure that you know what's going on and we're told what's going on. This document right here, this is the attorney's CYA. You know, leave it to the attorneys. They've got to do their CYA as well. This is saying that you know, no notice is being sent to the lien holder. We're not asking for the lien holder. I'm sorry, we're not asking for the attorneys to send anything. They're just closing the property for us. Now, Horn & Associates puts that selling the property in this way constitutes a default, and I disagree with that verbiage, because if you actually look at a due on sale clause, like I was talking to you about before, it gives them an option of calling the note due. It doesn't say if you do this, we will consider you in default and move forward. I've talked to the lead attorney there, which, full disclosure, I'm partners with Scott Horn, who's the attorney in Horn & Associates. And I've talked to him about this phrasing here, and he said basically that he puts default in there because he wants this to be as big and bad as scary as possible so that people really get the point across. But I just want to assure you, it's not a default. It's just it's a trigger more than it is a default there. We are triggering the due on sale clause. And that we are solely responsible for providing the information to the closing attorneys on what's owed on this property. You know, so I already have your mortgage statement right now, but I also have the authorization to release information. So we're going to be getting that information directly from the bank. I'm making this as easy on you as possible. Literally, once you get done signing this paperwork today, you get to kind of wipe your hands until it's time to go to closing. I may have to call you for something here or there, but let me handle that side of things. This shouldn't be a stress on you at all. And then neither the closing agent or attorney has been responsible for any of the underwriting of the buyer. Again, they're not approving the buyer to go into this property. That's my job, that's your job. The attorney is out of that. They're closing the deal and that's it. So you'll just sign and date right there. Now, this is the underlying lien disclosure. There's actually two documents that are exactly the same for this one. You're going to sign one and I'm going to sign one. And again, this is part of the requirements in the state of Texas when you're doing an underlying lien transaction like this, the subject to deal. And basically what this says is that, you know, we have to sign this paperwork 7 days before we actually close on the property. And that in that 7 days, I would have the option to terminate the contract for any reason. Now, I already have a 60-day option here. This is more to protect the consumer. This kind of stuff is more to protect the consumer. Somebody that doesn't know the ins and outs of this business like I do, somebody who hasn't done a ton of these deals like I have, this is to protect them. But like I said, each one of us will sign one. So you'll go ahead and sign and date down there at the bottom. And part of that disclosure says that you did receive this part of the law. And again, I've referenced it several times, what Texas state's law has to say about subject to transactions, and this is it right here. This is the conveyance of a residential property that has a lien on it. So this is everything that the state of Texas has to say about that, and I'm actually going to leave this with you so that you can read through that if you want to read through that, but everything that's in there is talked about here. This is the part about the third-party loan servicer. Now, I talked about that earlier. This is going to be if we wanted somebody else to collect the payments, and you know, at that point in time, they pay the bank, they pay me if I've got cash flow coming outside of that. Now, I don't typically do that. If you do want to have a third-party loan servicer, that's fine. But again, that's going to cost about $30 a month, and that'll be coming from your end. So instead, and this will be where you really decide between the third-party loan servicer or not, but instead of doing the third-party loan servicer, I'm just going to be paying the bank directly. So if you're good with that, we're just going to initial right here. You'll initial as seller, I'll initial as buyer, and then we'll sign and date down there at the bottom. This is the same exact underlying lien disclosure that we just showed you, that you signed. I'm going to sign that same one. Sign it right there. And this is all the state and federal mortgage regulations. You know, I talked about earlier, hey, I'm gonna send my buyers through processing to get all their financials and that kind of stuff. That's because there are laws that dictate that. There are things that have regulations for that. It happened after the housing crisis. All that crash happened. There was a lot of things that happened for consumer protection that we now have to take into account. And this explains what that stuff is. And it's all basically to do with something called the Dodd-Frank Act. But the Dodd-Frank Act amends a lot of other laws, and this names out what those laws are. In case you wanted some good bathroom reading, it's there for you. Now, investors, I have added pages onto the end of this contract that are not part of the actual contract, and I'm going to have those, again, if you are a member of CreativeCashFlow.com or you're watching this video, these things will be available for download so that you can see what I put. But basically, I want to have something in front of them that shows them what their anticipated next steps are going to be. So I have them sign one, and I sign one. Part of the reason why I do this is that if you have an acquisitions team like I do, you want to make sure that the acquisitions team is telling the seller everything that needs to be told. So we want to have a duplicate copy showing the seller signed one that says, hey, I acknowledged this, and then our representative is going to sign one and leave it with them saying, hey, I talked over this. So basically what this goes over is, these are the next steps that are going to happen from there. That's really all that's left on the contract. I just want to get some things in front of you for what to expect going forward. This is a list of needs that we have. We're going to need your original deed of trust. We're going to need your original note. We want a copy of your current insurance and the online login information for your bank. I'm sorry, not for your bank, but for your mortgage that we're continuing to make these payments on. So this is going to be stuff that we need. Now, most of those items I'm going to be able to get out of. Remember, we talked about you getting that folder of all the closing documents that you had when you bought this house. Most of the stuff I'm going to be able to get out of that. But if we can't, that'll be what we need to look for. Again, I'm going to be putting a for sale sign in your yard. We're going to start trying to show it and moving forward. I close on 99.94% of the houses that I contract, okay? So having this contract here pretty much means that we're good to go. Again, I do have that option period, but it's very rare that I ever use that. So what I've got here is the Acknowledgement of Procedures. It's the same paper. I'm going to sign one and leave it with you. You're going to sign one and I'm going to take it with me, just so that we know that we're both on the same page. You have an email address right here and you have my office number right here if you ever need to call or email us with any questions, okay? So you go ahead and sign that one while I'm signing this one. They get that done. And then again, I will put this as download for you guys. This has nothing to do with the contract, but if you have an acquisitions team, and even if you don't have an acquisitions team, it's just a good idea for you to have kind of a checklist of things that you needed to get done before you hand this in for processing to go to closing. So I have a checklist of 14 things that I hand my staff so that if I have an acquisitions team member go contract a property, they need to take this out, they need to fill it, sign it at the bottom, and fill this out so that my staff knows, hey, there are not arrearages on this. The seller is to receive the amount of cash of this, and it should be paid out when? By closing? By 10 years? By what? Is the seller receiving a second lien? Yes or no? I've notified the seller of the following items needed. Initial on each: insurance, note, deed of trust, mortgage statement, online logins. Seller's contact information, whatever the acquisition team member has. When does the option contract expire? So that kind of stuff. So download that as well, because I think it's a good idea to have with you. But guys, that's it. I know it's a lot of paperwork. I know that there's a lot going on with that, but it's important that you really describe everything that's happening and you really get it in front of your sellers so that they are comfortable with what's happening, okay? So keep on watching these videos. I know we went over a lot here. There's a lot of psychology behind the things that I was saying and when I'm saying them and how I'm saying them. So I do encourage you to try and really figure that out as a script and be able to recite that almost word for word and the same inflections and that kind of stuff that I was saying them, and that's really going to help you as you go out and you start contracting these houses. So keep on watching these videos. I really encourage you to check out Propelio.com. It's a great resource. They've sponsored these videos for us. They're part of they're a huge reason as to why you're getting such high quality content put in front of you on such a large scale here. So I encourage you to go check out what they're doing. Check us out on CreativeCashflow.com, and until next time, keep on learning.